Texas moves to 7-1, the best start in the Steve Sarkisian era after a 35-6 win over BYU on Saturday. This is the Horns 24/7 post-game analysis segment. Thanks so much for being here with us. Let's go ahead and jump right into some takeaways, starting off with Malik Murphy's first start at quarterback. The redshirt freshman getting the nod with Quinn Ewers out with an injury. 16 of 25 on the day, 64% completion percentage for 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, and a fumble. So started off the game a little bit rocky with that interception that we mentioned, but that play was just a disaster from the start. Wasn't expecting the snap, so he had to bobble the ball, get right into the play. Pressure came immediately from his backside, and so he was just kind of rushed into a throw, and it was just a soft ball that hung in the air way too long and fell right into the hands of BYU defender. So that aside, going to the fumble now, the play that the fumble was on was a play that Texas ran against Oklahoma State last year that resulted in a touchdown. It's basically a shallow screen for Xavier Worthy, but the play takes time to set up. So it requires the left guard, Hayden Connor in this case, to pull from his side to the other, and with help from the running back, block an edge rusher coming off the right side of the line. Jonathan Brooks got beat on that block, and Connor didn't make it there in time. So Malik Murphy got blown up in the backfield, and the ball came out. Really needed maybe a half a second longer to dump it off to Xavier Worthy, who was wide open waiting for the ball, but didn't have enough time to get the play off in this case, and so that resulted in the fumble and the turnover for Texas. Now, after the interception, Malik Murphy, 13 of 18 for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he bounced back very nicely and showed a lot of positives after that early mistake. The only nitpick for me is some of his passes. We saw it on the interception, and I'll touch on the second point in a little bit, just hung in the air a little too long, dangerously long, if you will. The deep touchdown pass to Adonai Mitchell is what stuck out to me. That ball hung in the air forever. And, if that ball had been thrown maybe a second earlier, it would have hit him in stride. Mitchell was essentially waiting on it in the end zone, but it just hung in there. And thankfully, the BYU defender wasn't able to turn around fast enough to make a play on the ball. Mitchell goes up and makes a nice play. So on those kinds of plays, that's where you really love to have guys like Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, who, it may not be the timeliest ball. It may be a ball they have to go up and get. Those are two guys who can go up and get it for you. And in that instance, he certainly did. Malik Murphy even acknowledged that it wasn't a great throw in Texas football on Instagram, posted that video, and he replied in the comments section with a duck emoji. So Malik and I are on the same page there, and that he certainly wants that one back. But hey, you take 6 points when you can take 6 points. Also, tip your cap to the offensive line for doing a good job protecting Malik Murphy. He was sacked just once and only hurried another time. So always good when you have a brand new quarterback in the game for you to get him protected up front. Overall, Malik Murphy, solid performance, but he's going to have to play a lot better and honestly pretty mistake-free next week with Kansas State coming into town. Let's go ahead and now talk about the defense. They recovered pretty nicely after struggling mightily against Houston last week. A lot of people, again, came for Pete Kwiatkowski last week, and once again, he responds. He leads the defense to a strong performance. Granted, BYU's offense not the best, but hey, you'll take 6 points, no touchdowns, and 3 turnovers any day of the week. Tied for the lowest amount of points they've given up this season. Last time they did that was Baylor. And tied for the most turnovers that they forced all season. Steve Sarkisian said that coming out of the bye, turnovers were going to be a huge point of emphasis for him. They had 2 last week against Houston, 3 this week. So 5 in the last 2 games. Last time they had 3 turnovers was week 1 against Rice. Chip and I talked during the game preview about how getting pressure on Keaton Slovis would be a massive point of emphasis for this Texas defense, and they did just that in order to disrupt him. They sacked him twice and forced 10 hurries as well. Also, just getting into the backfield overall, 12 tackles for loss. They held BYU to 2 of 13 on third down, and the average down and distance on third down was 7.3 yards. So forcing them into those difficult situations and making Keaton Slovis's job very hard to do. So they certainly executed on that front. Now, again, the important thing to remember with BYU is that they're ranked now, after this performance, 123rd out of 130 FBS teams in total offense. I believe they were already pretty down low coming into this game as well. So keep that in mind, because Kansas State, the number 15 total offense in the country coming into town next week. From some quick hitters here from takeaways before we get into a look at Kansas State and some remaining questions. Number one, solid day from Jonathan Brooks, 16 carries, 98 yards, and a touchdown. Brooks is now tied for fourth amongst all running backs in FBS play in rushing yards this season with 923. Texas stays at number 7 in the AP poll. Kansas State cracks into it. They slide into the number 25 slot. So this is the fourth top 25 matchup for Texas this season. A win would be their third top 25 win of the year in the AP. This offense just still has not found an answer in the red zone. 2 for 5. Some of it is situational, but the bottom line is points are going to have to come one way or another, especially in this closing stretch of Big 12 play when you have teams like Kansas State, TCU, Iowa State, and Texas Tech coming up, where you're going to need a lot of points to defeat them. And so we thought the issues were resolved against Houston. They go 4 for 4 with 3 touchdowns, but rears its ugly head again. And again, some of it is situational. I think Eric made a really good point in the instant reaction yesterday, but nonetheless, this is something that has to be fixed if Texas wants to compete for a Big 12 title and more. All right, so now let's take a look at the next opponent in the Kansas State Wildcats. 6-2 overall. They are 4-1 in conference play. They defeated Houston 41-0 on Saturday, a week removed from Texas only beating Houston by 7. So take that as you will, just the numbers from me. They have won their last 2 games by a combined margin of 82-3. So this Kansas State offense is firing on all cylinders, especially at the quarterback position. They kind of have a 2-quarterback system going on at the moment with Will Howard and Avery Johnson. Howard was the guy who started off the season for him, really struggled throughout most of the year, but the last 2 games he's come along very nicely. 318 yards and 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Avery Johnson exploded for 5 rushing touchdowns a couple weeks ago against Texas Tech, and since then, 2 passing touchdowns. He's been a little bit more quiet, only had 4 carries for -5 yards in the win against Houston last week, but he still came in, as I mentioned, 5 of 6 through the air for 46 yards and a touchdown. Kansas State's defense, number 44 in total defense, number 6 in third down defense, and number 23 in run defense. So this is a very well-balanced team that's well-coached. Chris Kleeman does a great job on both sides of the ball. That's going to be a big challenge for Texas. I think we're going to learn a lot about where this Texas team stands going into the rest of Big 12 play and potentially if they make it to a Big 12 championship come Saturday. So we'll end this thing off with questions that need to be answered. Number one, can the Longhorns continue to be successful in the run game, especially if Malik Murphy struggles at all in the Kansas State game? They're going to need to lean on Jonathan Brooks, Cedric Baxter, even Keelan Robinson and Jaden Blue, who had really nice games on Saturday. Can those guys get the job done for you on the ground? They have so far this year, and they should be confident that they can going forward. Number two, can Malik Murphy play a similar brand of efficient football, but now just remove the minor mistakes and the interceptions and the fumbles and the turnovers? Obviously, it's his first start. Those things are to be expected. Can he grow up in a matter of a week to lead this team to a big victory against a tough Kansas State team? Number three, how does Texas's defense handle this 2-quarterback system? Will Howard and Avery Johnson, just kind of combine the names there, can both run the ball, but Avery Johnson is certainly the guy who's more of the running threat. Howard can beat you through the air. Can they find a way to balance that out defensively and be able to have a solid plan for each quarterback when they come into the game? And lastly, can the Longhorns punch in touchdowns in the red zone and especially at the goal line? They've really struggled there all season, and it could have honestly won them their only loss of the year against Oklahoma. They're just haven't been able to do it at a high rate so far this year. Can they finally turn that page and keep it a constant going into the last 4 weeks of the schedule? So that's going to wrap things up for the Horns 24/7 post-game analysis. As we mentioned, Kansas State coming into town next week, 11 a.m. kickoff on Fox. Super excited for another top 25 matchup. Should be a good one in Austin. Thanks so much for being here with us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you are the first to know when new content heads your way. For the rest of the crew, I'm Tommy Yars. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.